rests on three legs of a three-legged stool. You have to have right religion. You have to have right action, right behavior. And finally, right motives. And so we're going to look at the path to getting to those places. Where can we find this ancient path that Jeremiah talks about? And what do we find on that path? A lot of Jesus' ministry focused on answers to those very questions. So that's our topic. Here's some preliminary observations before we go further. First one, getting on the right way involves a choice. That's what he says at the beginning of Jeremiah 6:16. Choose the right way. You know, at pivotal points in life, every one of us has to make a decision, a big decision. It could be about marriage, it could be about job, about a lot of things, but the biggest decision we'll ever make is, what path am I going to walk in life? We stand at a crossroads, make a choice. There's a narrow road and there's a broad way. You got to pick one. You know, there's a red pill and a blue pill. You got to take one of those. You got to choose. What's it going to be? Your first choice, of course, is always followed by a whole series of other choices. It's not like it's one and done. But you make that first big choice, then you follow that with daily choices. Some are big, some are small, but every one of them matter. Second preliminary point, it's not only a choice, the path to rest in God is a path. It's a journey. You know, professing Christ is not like stepping into a Star Trek transporter. Bzz, you're dematerialized and you rematerialize in heaven. And it's not that you profess Christ, put on Christ in baptism, and suddenly you're a totally new person. You have a total new personality. All of your impulses are totally changed. That's not exactly the way it happens. Sudden transition is a part of becoming a Christian, the new life. Colossians 1:13 expresses this perspective. Paul says Jesus has transferred us from the dominion of darkness into the kingdom of light. So in a sense, we are instantly transported out of one kingdom into another. But we also walk daily. And so we have to keep that perspective in mind. That's why the Christian life is called a path, because it doesn't happen all at once. It's called sanctification. It's called growth. You change over time. The King James Version I keep forgetting to turn this on. Okay, let's go back. King James Version reads that Jesus has translated us into the kingdom of heaven. And I like that version, translated instead of transferred. I'm no Greek scholar. I can't tell you which one of those words is the best. But translated is a real resonant, evocative phrase there for me. Because when we enter Christ, we find ourselves speaking a brand new spiritual language. You know, the story of our old life was written in godlessness. It was written in error. We spoke and thought in the language of maybe materialism. Or we spoke and thought in the language of New Age spiritualism, something like that. Now we're at a new nation with a new king, a new constitution. We have to learn how to think more and more clearly in a new language. We call that language God. Think in terms, speak in terms of righteousness and grace and holiness. We've got new words, a new alphabet. Well, it takes time. If you ever learn a new language, it takes time. Just like walking a path takes time. You have to learn what righteousness means. You have to learn to think in terms of righteousness. One of the great parts about growing as a Christian is seeing life situations, seeing life people, and verses come to mind. You say, oh, this is like 1 Kings 8. Or, oh, this is like Jesus talking with these people. You have learned a new language, you make new connections. That takes time. That takes a life. That's a walk. But the fact that we're in a new nation and we're learning to speak a new language doesn't mean we'll have to stay there. It doesn't guarantee that we'll stay there. We still have a choice. Every day you have a choice. It's possible to say, I don't like this new language. I don't like this new place. I want to go back. This new language is hard. I like the old language. It just had one word, me. So the language of me I enjoy. We can go back. Hebrews 10 speaks to this possibility. It says we can go back. It says we have to persevere so that when we've done the will of God, we'll receive what's promised. Once we've done it, it's one thing to pass through customs, to enter the new nation of God's kingdom. It's one thing to start learning the language, but you got to keep on, or you won't master it. Here's what Hebrews 10 says. You will need to persevere so that when you've done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay, and my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. But we don't belong to those who shrink back. We belong to those who have faith and persevere. Well, the path is one we have to walk with perseverance. You can turn back. You can stop the journey. We don't want to do that. In 1917, Wallace Stevens published a poem called 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. Well, there may be 13 ways of looking at Christianity. I don't know about that. I know two. One is we enter a new kingdom, new world. We're pulled out of this. If we're a fish, we're pulled out of this aquarium. We're put into that aquarium. The second is the Christian life is a journey. It's a path. We're going to look at the idea of the path today. But speaking of walking the path, seek the old path, walk on it. I looked in a thesaurus. There's a lot of words for walking. Here's a few of them. You can traipse. You can tiptoe. You can mosey. You can trudge. You can prance. You can plod. You can parade. You can strut. Well, how we follow the path matters. The writer of Hebrews says, run with perseverance. We've got to have some determination about us. Think about it. If I found the ancient path, am I running on that path with determination? I want to get to the end. I'm running. Or am I moseying? Am I traipsing? Am I trudging? Just duty? Am I strutting down the path? None of those will work. You won't get to the end of the path if you're strutting or if you're moseying or if you're just prancing around or traipsing. How determined am I to get to the end? How am I going to walk is that question. Am I just trying out the walk? Walking the Christian life is okay as long as the trail's not too steep and it's not raining and I don't run into any creepy people. Well, then I'll stay on the walk. But if things get a little bit difficult, the company doesn't always seem so good, then I think I'm out of here. So we've got to choose the path. And it's hard to make that choice initially. Everybody in high school used to read a Robert Frost poem, Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. When you're standing off the path and looking at paths, it's really hard sometimes to tell which is the right path. Well, the right path gets clearer as you go. We'll talk about that. If you're on the wrong path, that gets clearer as you go. And you may have to go back and get on the right path. Or you may need to say, this path is the right one. I'm gaining more faith. I'm running with greater determination. But something will happen on that path. We need to walk on it seriously and hopefully with anticipation, getting to the end. You know, following Christ is purposeful, and that's the end of this point. We've got to run with perseverance on this path. I think about a song that's a devotional song from India, some people say the 30s, 40s. It was really kind of popularized in 1959. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. And it continues. The cross before me, the world behind me, I still will follow. No turning back. That's the decision. Some people sneer at that and call it decision theology. Scriptures, sometimes you give things a name to diminish it. Scripture's full of you make a decision, and you follow that decision. A lot of profound theology in that. We've got to examine our ways, search for the right way, identify the right path, get on it, and stay on it. That's the bottom line. So, recognizing the right path, develop that idea a little bit further. The Beatles had a great song, The Long and Winding Road. He talks about the many paths we've tried, many ways we'll never know, but still they lead us back to the long and winding road. There's a path. We've got to get on it. If you're young, you want to start the path the right way. If you've gotten on the wrong path, you want to get on the right one. It's hard to admit, I'm on the wrong road. Janet laughs at me, I'll get on the wrong road. I don't want to admit it. Or I will say, you know, if we just make a couple of left turns, keep heading to the west, we'll get on the right road. So sometimes you have to admit you're on the wrong road and go back and start over. Sometimes you got to admit, I've been moseying along, not taking this very seriously, and I need to pick up the pace. So what signs do you look for to see if you're on the right path? For one thing, if you're on the right path, you're going to find some little bits of treasure along the way. You're going to find some road signs along the way that let you know that this path is the right path. We'll find food that strengthens us, spiritual food. Doesn't bloat us, it makes us stronger. And first thing we need to understand about all of these paths, we don't want to take a path that we put together. A lot of times we think, I'm the captain of my fate. I don't follow the rules. I make my rules. You'll never get on the right path with that attitude. The right attitude is finding the right path because it doesn't originate with us. The right path is not one that we devise. It's not one that anybody's devised. And history is full of philosophies. This is the right way to live. This is the way to live a good life. This is the way to get on the good path. How to construct a good life. Our world is full of them. As Christians, we live in a world that's full of these other ways of life. Let's review some of these and see how these ways, maybe we've tried them, aren't really the right paths. One of these says that a good life is a life that maximizes enjoyable experiences, happiness, and experiences a minimum amount of pain and distress. The maximum good for the maximum number of people, or for the people I care the most about. That's what's good. It's just a life that maximizes pleasure and minimizes pain. That's what's good. The good way minimizes discomfort, increases enjoyment. There's some problems there. The greatest good, let's go ahead and look at both of these. The devil is always in the details. A high-minded version of this philosophy says, the right way to live is what brings maximum happiness, minimum discomfort to the maximum number of people. Whatever is good for the group overall, that's what's good. But think about that. What if persecuting the minority is for the good, in our way of seeing things, of the majority? When you think about that, you follow that path, and you're on the path of, I know, let's find a 12-year-old girl and throw her in the volcano. Bad for her, but we're all going to do great. We'll get rainfall or whatever. What? You see, the maximum good to the maximum number of people can lead you to some really awful things. It may lead us to genocide, the final solution. Nazi Germany thought if we just get rid of a certain population, everybody's life will be a lot better. The world will be a better place. You got to be careful with saying what's going to bring the maximum good to the maximum number of people, because that can easily get ugly. Some other people say, well, you don't have to do that. Just whatever brings the maximum happiness to me or the people I care most about. That's what's good. So just look out for yourself. The philosophy of just self-interest, maximizing your good. If everybody just does what's best for him or her, in the end, it's all going to turn out okay for everybody. This path of life stumbles over another stone. Not everybody really understands what's good for them. Proverbs 14:12 says, there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is the way to death. So sometimes it looks right, but it's not, and you don't know that. Can I really say, I'm going to do what's best for me when I don't even know what's best for me? If you've raised children, you know, a lot of times they think they know what's best. And it's not the best. I want to just run straight to the car. No, you don't. There's traffic, you see. They don't know what's best. It also stumbles over the fact that not everybody has equal understandings of what good is. You know, you may think if I transfer money from his bank account to my bank account, that's to my good. So I'll file some frivolous lawsuits and get his money. Well, he may think what's good for me is to shoot the person who is filing frivolous lawsuits trying to get my money. You see, you have these competing ideas of narrow, selfish good. I'm not sure that the right path of life is going to work on the principle of just bring the greatest good to the greatest number of people. Well, let's move ahead. Some other of these that we all have to maybe think about but reject. Another way of describing the good path in life, outlining a good path in life, says the best life is one that's lived on good intentions. If you'll just intend to do the right thing in every situation, then you're on the right path and it will end up right. Well, if you're like me, you're already thinking the road to where is paved with good intentions? That's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It doesn't always work out. And that's not to say you shouldn't act with good intentions. But I don't think good intentions are enough. Trusting your gut, listening to your heart. Assume that you kind of instinctively know what's right. And if you just follow your instincts, you'll be doing okay. We all know the song. It was written by Joe Brooks. Debbie Boone, Pat Boone's daughter, sang it, "You Light Up My Life." How can it be wrong when it feels so right? Trusting your gut, intending to do the right thing. Maybe it won't work. Well, there's a famous ancient Greek tragedy. It tells the story of a man, you've probably read it or heard of it, who learns that he has been prophesied, that he will kill his father and marry his mother. Well, he doesn't intend to do that. He intends not to do that. So he runs away from home. When he's on the road, he gets into an altercation, ends up killing a man who is acting haughtily towards him. He travels on further. He rescues the city from this monster. And in gratitude, they say, well, you get to marry our recently widowed queen and rule our city. And he says, great. Life is working out. I didn't follow my fate. But of course, you've already guessed it if you don't already know it. The man he met on the road was his birth father. He had been adopted. The woman he married, the queen of the city, was his birth mother that he didn't know. He intended to do the right thing, and he ended up doing something unspeakable. Intentions don't always lead you to the right thing. You need to intend to do the right thing in every circumstance, but you can't just trust your instincts. You can't just trust your intuitions about what's right. Your intentions are not enough. You don't have enough information for that. Another view. It's a rights-based view. This idea of how we need to live is based in the Declaration of Independence. This is a classical statement of it. This is the path our nation will follow. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that men are all created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. So we're going to base the path of life upon the rights. Everybody has rights. It's right and proper to respect the rights of other people. But what happens when I start focusing on my rights instead of your rights? I start thinking, Byron Brown has rights. He needs to look out for his rights. He deserves some happiness too. Happiness is found when I exercise my rights. And if this right is to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness, what do I mean by liberty? I have the right to do whatever I feel like doing whenever I feel like it? A right to happiness? The world owes me happiness. I have a right to be happy, and if I'm not happy, you're to blame. Why aren't you making me happy? I believe I have the right to put old cars on concrete blocks in my front yard. And you think you have the right to live in a neighborhood that doesn't have snakes and other creepy crawlies coming out from old cars in the neighbor's yard. You see, what happens when our rights conflict? There's a word for rights-obsessed people, always looking to see who's violating their rights. They're called Karens. I don't know how that term got there, a Karen, but always miserable, always constantly in conflict because someone is interfering with my right to life or liberty or the pursuit of happiness. Things aren't going my way, and I have a right to have everything I want. That's not a path to happiness. Here's the problem with all these systems. They're all good ideas. Respect the rights of others. Or do what's going to bring the greatest good. Or always act with the best intentions. All of those general principles get caught up in the gravitational pull of our self. So it's like a asteroid going through space. When it gets close to this big, massive body, it starts suddenly circling it. So we've got a good principle moving along, but then it hits my big ego, and then suddenly my big ego warps it, pulls it out of its other orbit, and we've got a mess. That's can I trust my reasoning, my feelings, protect my rights? All of those things crash on this reef of sin. That's where philosophy goes wrong. It doesn't recognize sin. it acts as if we can just do whatever we want and it will turn out right, that we can totally control ourselves. And we all know that we can't. So all of these human devised paths all fall apart on that terrible, ugly secret of sin. I like what Mike Tyson said. He said, every boxer, when he steps into the ring, has a plan. And the first time he gets hit in the nose, that plan is gone. Well, Christianity is for people who have been hit in the nose by life. It's easy to sit in an ivory tower, or Immanuel Kant, or whoever, and I can devise a great philosophy of life. Christianity deals with reality. It's for those of us who have been hit in the face. And all these high-sounding ideas don't work. That's the path we need to get on. There's one more path philosophy of our ages gives we need to talk about, and that is a good life is one that's lived in its totality in an appropriate way. And you get that word appropriate. That's not appropriate. That's appropriate. Was that appropriate? Well, what does that mean? The standard that we call appropriate is socially determined. It's socially constructed. Whatever the group says is normative, acceptable, or good is the right thing to do. So you draw your standards from whatever the group says. The path that leads you to stay normative for your society is the right path. I found a little headline that sort of summarized that well for an article in this sort of psychology online journal. Morality is the behavior and beliefs that a society deems acceptable. So the right path is just whatever everybody agrees is the right path. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So that's how you know you're on the right path. A corollary to that is that none of us can ever do everything appropriately at every time. That's just humanly impossible. That's about as close as philosophy will ever get to sin. Sometimes you don't know the rules, make a mistake about the rules, you can't follow the rules, so we don't always do that perfectly. But if you lead a generally acceptable life, then you're on the right path. Then you're a good person. You're doing okay. Think about this. I'm a good person. I pay my taxes. I don't drink and drive. I don't hit my wife unless she really provokes me. Most importantly, I mind my own business. I don't criticize anybody. In my book, I'm okay and you're okay. You see, I fit the norms of our society. I'm a good person because I have my failings, I'll admit it, but I generally follow the rules. From this viewpoint, any action that's legal is good. By the way, Martin Luther King really challenged that in his letter from Birmingham jail, where he says, a just law is a law that applies to everyone equally, and unjust law is one that doesn't. But segregation was legal. He said, that didn't make it right, because it treated different classes of people in different ways. Absolutely true. So just being legal doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. It may be the law to turn in your neighbor. If they go to Bible study, you're going to be a good person and just do the law? I hope not. It also says if some position is held by a lot of people or influential people, celebrities, public figures, if it's applauded in the media, then it's the right thing. Whatever internet tells me is good is good. I just do what I hear on TV. That's not a path to good. That way is pretty broad. It's pretty forgiving. But is it the path to happiness, the path to peace, the path to rest? Well, we've got a few minutes. We'll go further. Let's jump ahead a few chapters in Jeremiah to chapter 10. In verse 23 of Jeremiah 10, the prophet prays, Lord, I know that people's lives are not their own. It is not for them to direct their steps. That's the reality that hits us. Some people hit this reality after trying half a dozen philosophies during their life and none of them work. Some of them never catch on. Some people, it takes just a few minutes of thought to see some of the problems. It is not in us to direct our steps. Our lives are not our own. You know us. You devise the right way. It's called the ethics of divine command. I don't like calling the scriptural way a divine command. For one reason, it implies that God just made up some rules. There's a council in heaven. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, maybe some angels got together in a group and said, let's make up some rules for people, commands for them to follow. Let's tell everybody they've got to take the trash out every Friday. No, let's don't do that. Let's tell them they've got to keep the Sabbath day holy every Sabbath day. Oh, yeah, that sounds better. Another one said, I got a great idea. Let's give people powerful sexual urges and then tell them they have to control those. That'll be fun. Wahaha. It implies that God just sort of randomly made up some rules out of thin air just to afflict people with. So when you say an ethic of divine command, that implies a certain randomness to what God wants of us. And the truth, I think, is God knows us. He made us. And there are just certain immutable realities that He is protecting us from. Certain truths He's guiding us towards. So it's not just divine command. I think it's better called a path of reality. I can live my life any way I want. I can snort anything up my nose I choose or stick it in my veins. That's my liberty. I'm free. I can do that. But you don't know where that might lead. God does. He made us. He said, don't do that. Avoid pharmakeia. Avoid addiction to alcohol. I know what it will do to you. And we could go on and on through every one of these commands. What I'm saying is, when we look at the biblical way, that path of life, it's a path that doesn't depend on human reason being reliable, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It doesn't depend on the power of human will. It says we need forgiveness and a slow process of sanctification. It doesn't depend on the innocence of human intentions and emotions. I've forgotten the scriptural reference, but the idea is that the human heart is dark and doesn't know itself, and that's true. So we need to turn to God for guidance. Proverbs 25:4 says to God, the right path is your path. Speaking about God, in Isaiah 2:3, it says, the right path is God's path. It's not ours to blaze. It's not ours to devise. We have to follow it. So let's look at some of the ways the Bible describes this path. We're going to look at as many as we can today and finish next week. These are the markers we'll see. Here's how you know if you're on the right path. And if these things are absent, maybe my path isn't just right. One is the path of righteousness and justice. Well, those are good words. Those are sort of God words. And we can say righteousness and justice. And they kind of hit us like water on a duck's back and roll off. They're just kind of religion words. So let's try to unpack those a little bit. Psalm 23 says, you lead me in paths of righteousness. Well, what does that mean? The word righteous is tzedek. It can be a just or an accurate measurement or a weight. If something is righteous, It's just, it's accurate, it's not influenced by that big self that pulls good ideas out of their orbit and makes them selfish ideas. Unrighteousness makes excuses. I'm a little tired tonight, or I had a bad day. I've earned the right to be a jerk this evening. I can just yell at whoever I want to because I had a bad day. You see, that's unrighteousness. It is not keeping to the same standard. I'm a victim. I've had a bad life, so I'm entitled to making selfish outbursts and irrational demands. I have to. I'm a victim. I have that right. That's unrighteousness. We've gotten off the standard and we make ourselves a special case or whatever. Righteousness means the standard that I expect others to follow is the standard that I follow, is the standard that God states. That is righteousness. So wisdom in Proverbs 8 says, I dwell with prudence, I find knowledge and discretion. I walk in the way of righteousness, tzedek, and in the paths of justice. Justice and righteousness go together a lot. In Job 29, verse 14, Job says, righteousness has been my robe and justice has been my turban. You know, I'm dressed in these. There's sort of two parts of what we have and what we believe. They're related. Justice is how we regulate ourselves. Do I follow the standards I hold others to? Do I follow the standards of Scripture? Make ourselves a special case. Man, that was a terrible interview. I think drunkenness is wrong, but I just need to go have a couple of stiff drinks. You see, we make ourselves a special case. That's unrighteousness. So if you're righteous, you impartially apply God's standards to yourself. You don't show favoritism to some. You don't show prejudice to other people. You treat everybody the same. Justice. What is justice? It means that you do not show favoritism. You treat others the same. So righteousness, I follow. Justice, I treat others as I would be treated. When Jesus says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that is both righteousness and justice in a nutshell, those two. Are you finding those things in your life? Are you finding those things around you? That's the first test. Am I on the right path? Am I finding myself being more righteous, adjusting my behavior to the standard, not adjusting the standard to my behavior? Am I being just towards others, not showing prejudice against or favoritism toward others? That's the first test. We better stop at that point, and we'll look at two or three others and then look at what the ancient paths are, the ancient part of that, next week. Thanks.